Hey guys, Mystic here, and today we're doing another video in the series Stats and You. Again, we're focusing on the engineer, but this time we're focusing on the tank flavor of the engineer. Now, before we get too far into this video, let me take a moment here to pause and thank the blacklisted guild member Technician Tweak, without whom none of this information nor this video would be possible. He is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the engineer class. So if you're interested in finding out more about the engineer in more depth than what's presented here, by all means, please visit his site, which will be provided at the end of the presentation, as well as in the video description for more additional information. Now, turning our attention to the tank version of the engineer, it's important to note that, again, we need to focus on our stats, because this is really what's going to make or break our ability to tank in WildStar. Now, with the player profile open, remember, again, you can hit the P key, right, for player to bring open the player profile. So now we're going to be on this display here for stats. If it's not there, again, just click the drop down box, select stats, and you'll be able to see the exact same information, just with different numbers on your screen. Now, by no means is this character configured to play a tank, so it's merely here for informational purposes only, right? So when we talk about engineer tank stats, we're actually talking more about the defensive stats with a little bit of offensive mixed in. Now, primary ones that we're really looking at for our tank stats are critical mitigation and glance chance and glance mitigation. We do mix in, like I said, a smidge of offensive stats, and we see that mostly in the multi-hit category here. Now, having understood how to get to your stats, which ones might actually be applicable, let's take a moment here and let's jump over to the presentation itself, so we can actually look at that information a little bit more in depth, right? And kind of get you guys, kind of understanding where you want to be and what you want to focus on in order to tank in WildStar as an engineer. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to pull open the actual site here. Let me go ahead and resize that. That looks much better, I'm sure. All right, guys. So here it is, the engineer tank stat priorities for 2018. Now, here's what we're going to do. It's going to be a little bit different than the traditional presentations we put together here. We're talking about stat order priority, and we know here pre-glance build and glance build. And the reason why it is when you first hit 50, the gear that you have, the runes that you have, not so much are going to be focused around glance just yet, right? But critical mitigation is something that you can really start working on right away, okay? With critical mitigation, here's where critical mitigation and strike through become parallel stats, but for two different types. And by that I mean, if you remember from our previous DPS videos, strike through is this horizontal stat that runs across the spectrum of all DPS classes in WildStar. You need a certain amount of strike through, right, in order to actually participate in certain level of content. Well, on the tank side of the shop, the critical mitigation plays that same role for tanks. So the content that you're looking to do will affect your ability to participate in that content based upon your critical mitigation. We'll get more into that in the next slide. So when you're first starting out, focus on critical mitigation. Once you start getting some glance stuff, you start focusing on glance and putting that into the rotation. Then you're still going to want to do critical mitigation to content type. Then you're going to focus on glance to at least 87% out of combat. Okay, that's important, out of combat, because some abilities will actually increase your glance rating while in combat, or some food that you can take. So keep that in mind, 87% rested in terms of glance rating. Multi-hit. Now here's where that bleed over into offensive or assault stats come into play. Multi-hits at 15 to 20%. Next up is armor. And lastly, health. For obvious reasons, right? More armor, the better you are. The more health, the better you are, right? Kind of self-evident at that point. Now, next slide up is this critical mitigation, right? This was the stat I was talking about. That's a horizontal stat. That's across all of the tank classes. So, in this case, for critical mitigation percentages for dungeons, you're looking at a minimum of 50%. For raid tier 1, which would be genetic archives, you're looking at 62%. And raid tier 2 for datascapes, you're looking at 82%. Finally, at raid tier 3, the Red Moon Terror, you're looking at 89%. So you can see the scale and the climb that you need to take in order to participate in these types of contents as a tank engineer in WildStar. Now, sometimes we just can't get there with our gear as it is and the runes that we're using. So we somehow have to supplement that and try to bridge that gap. So in steps food. Food is definitely going to be something that you're going to want to make sure you can either create yourselves or have a guild that can actually provide this for you or to you, or know some guild mates who can actually make this food if you supply them the mats. Now, here's what we're looking at for food. You can see the food names here, and you can see what the descriptions that they do over here. 2 of them focus on increasing armor, and 2 of them focus on increasing glance. Here we have this Red Moon Terror boost, but this one basically increases armor by 236 for an hour. Most likely, you're not going to have access to that for a bit, but just keep it in the back of your mind, as this is something that you can get, which could help increase your armor for a whole hour. And lastly, there's this field tech, kind of like your gadget. You see here, it will grant you 6250 absorb for 10 seconds. So that could definitely be helpful when you know a big hit is coming in from the boss. At least you'll be able to take 6250 of that hit out of the equation. So that's always something to think about and know that's there for you as an option. Now, we're talking about regular runes here. And by regular runes, I mean, you know, when I mentioned that you just hit 50 and you want to start focusing on critical mitigation, armor, and health, well, this is kind of like the same thing. Here, these are these regular runes that you can start going for right away for your gear. Now, first rune setup is called Alleviation, and you can read from the description what it does. And the next setup is Defiance. So that adds some armor and some glance rating to your actual setup. Next up is our glance rune. So when we're in that position to turn our attention to the glance rating, we're still going to be looking at Alleviation, but now we're going to be adding in Provoker, Defiance, and Gleaming. Well, Gleaming actually is kind of not something you're going to get to right away, so don't worry too much about that. Next up, Tank PvE class set runes. These class set runes come from actually the raids themselves. So you see in the genetic archives, we get a rune set called Unbreakable. And you see by putting 4 power in with Unbreakable, we get this, right? When we put 8 power in, we get this. Now, when it comes to data escapes, there's one called Mecha Shield, and you can read from the description what Mecha Shield gives you, right? Next is Deadlight, and that comes from Red Moon Terror, and the same approach applies. 4 power in gives you this, 8 power in gives you that. So, these are something to focus on when you're actually getting into raiding content. These are the sets you're going to want to look for in those particular dungeons or instances. Next up is our fusion runes. I've broken this fusion runes down by the armor type or the armor position. So in the weapon position, we're going to want to attach Venom. This is the exact same rune that we're using on our tank and our engineer DPS side. Now when it comes to the helmet, we technically have 2 choices. If you really like your healers, Hardy is the way to go, because this obviously gives you a lot more health, which means that the healers have to pay less attention to you. However, on the other hand, there is Impervious, which basically gives you a defense boost for about 5 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. So that's something to think about as well. So it just depends on, which way you want to play. But it's good to know that you have 2 choices in this weapon slot, and you go the way in which you feel best to go in. Next up is Chest, and we're looking at the Mountain Fusion Rune. And next up from that is the Gloves with Menace Fusion Rune. Now, here's the Primal Matrix priorities, right? So here we're talking about the Black Hole ability as a tank, right? That's the one spell that the engineer tanks get as a new spell when they hit 50 and they unlock the Primal Matrix. So this page lifted directly from Technician Tweak's site. So this is exactly the wording from there. So you can kind of look at the percentages that you can get by working your way through the Primal Matrix. Next up is our amp layout. So this is the basic, just hit 50, maybe got a couple extra amp points. This is what you kind of want to shoot for in your configuration. Again, the color of the amp is also specified over here, so you can kind of see which ones you should hold on to, because you might not have 66 points available just yet, but which ones you should take right away. Now, I've also included a picture of what it looks like when you do have 66 points to spend in your amp tree, and it looks like this. So, guys, this is the video on tank stats in you for the engineer tank. Now, again, a huge thank you to Technician Tweak. This is his site. By all means, please go and visit. There's several additional guides on that site. It's not just limited to the tank and DPS versions of the engineer. So, like I said initially in the beginning, there is additional detail on the tank spec on this site. So please visit there if you have more questions about, or you're still trying to figure out what you need to do with your tank. But this video should be enough to get you going in the right direction and what you should really be focusing on. So guys, thank you so very much for watching this video. Thank you for all the support you've shown. I really appreciate it. Now, I also want to mention, if you're watching this video and you're not following my channel, if you would so kindly, please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, or just want to see when the next videos are coming out, by all means, please leave that question or comment in the comment section of the video. I read all of them and I'll respond to them as fast as I can. Next up in the video series, we're going to be looking at Esper, Stalker, Warrior, and Spellslinger. So those videos are still to come, so look for those in the future. But for now, I hope this has given you enough to work on when it comes to the engineer and the medics, as both of their videos are completed. So guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And I hope you're having a fantastic time in WildStar. And I hope to see you in-game or on my stream. Don't forget, I stream almost every day at Mystic813 on the Twitch platform. So twitch.tv/Mystic813. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Hope to see you in game or on my stream. Till then, have a great time, and I hope you're enjoying WildStar.